What is up, everyone? It is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. And so today is a super exciting video because today we are going to be doing my January reading wrap-up. So talking through all of the books that I read in the month of January and giving you my thoughts and recommendations on each. So the first book that I read in January was Normal People by Sally Rooney. So Normal People, it's a love story between two people. They know each other from high school and then they end up going to the same college. And then there are some like bumps in the road in their friendship, relationship along the way. They keep getting separated and then coming back together. So it's like sort of, will the relationship work out? Will it not work out? And so for me, I was not really a fan of Normal People, so I'm giving it a 2 out of 5 stars. I don't know, I just felt like the character development was a little bit off. I wish it delved more into like the pasts of these two main characters, but I felt like it sort of glossed over these parts of the character and then it was just like, ah, they're back together again, like that kind of thing. So I wasn't really a fan. I'm also on the wait list for a few other Sally Rooney books. This is my first Sally Rooney read, so we'll have to see if I enjoy her other works. The next book I read in January was In an Instant by Suzanne Redfearn. So this novel follows a family like trip vacation that ends up horribly wrong because they get into a very big accident. It's not just one family in this accident, but it's two families. They have some friends aboard as well. So the novel goes through the accident, the crash, as well as the character choices. Do they survive this accident? How do they survive this accident? And the aftermath of the accident. So I really loved this novel. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. I was literally not expecting the point of view that this story is written from. It was so shocking. And I just thought that this book was so fascinating because it really is like a what would you do scenario. The author at the end of the book was describing how she went through a similar kind of situation where her family and a family friend and their dad were trapped in freezing temperatures. Their dad went off to get help, but the parent watching the author, her brother, and his own kids was really only paying attention to his kids, helping his kids keep warm, and leaving her and her brother out to freeze. That true story that the author went through inspired the story here because in this story, it delves into the decision making of the parents, whether if you're actually related to someone, will you care about them more than if you aren't related to that person in these life or death scenarios. So the next book that I quote read, but I did not actually finish this book. It is Atomic Habits by James Clear. But basically this is a self-help book that talks all about building and forming habits and how you can maintain these habits over long periods of time. So I don't know, I feel like I'm not a fan of self-help books. I feel like a lot of the information that they're sharing seem to be very like common sense oriented. I couldn't finish it. Maybe for you all, if you're looking to get some new habits for those New Year's resolutions coming in February, then maybe Atomic Habits is a book for you. So the next book I read is Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. So this was interesting because this author is actually two women writing the book. I feel like I read a few other books where it was actually two people with one pen name. So I thought that was interesting. Like Christina Lauren is the two first names of the women mushed together. So Love and Other Words, as the title suggests, is a love story between two people. They met each other while growing up and then had a falling out, and then now they just reconnected after many years apart. So I feel like that's a sort of common storyline for a lot of these love stories. So I would give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought this storyline was very cute. I do wish they delved more into the boy's perspective of why their relationship friendship ended, as well as the aftermath of that night. And also I felt like the banter, some of it was sort of odd. And also this book takes place in San Francisco. A lot of mentions of Berkeley and SF, and so I went to college at Berkeley, so definitely relatable in that regard. So the next book I read in January is Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier. This novel follows a story between a husband and wife. Their young son gets kidnapped at a market in Seattle, and he's been missing for over a year now. So going into the grief and trauma and strain on their relationship of having their young son kidnapped, as well as the questions of like, why was he kidnapped? Who kidnapped him? Why can't we find him? Additionally, the husband is cheating on his wife with another woman. The wife finds out, and then she wants to concoct a plan to have a hitman murder the other woman. So I liked reading this novel. I would give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Docking half a point there because of that whole trope of, oh, my partner is cheating on me with someone else, I'm going to blame the other woman in this scenario and get her murdered. Just was something that didn't sit right with me. But once you get further into the book, you're reading more about like the history and choices of these people. It's a very interesting book. So the next book I read in January is The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. And so I wanted to read this because it won Goodreads Top Horror Book of 2021. So I was like, okay, it's a winner in this category, let's try it out. And so this novel is about a group of final girls. So they were the final person standing at the end of some kind of massacre, traumatic event. They all have a support group together to help one another out. However, some of the final girls in this support group start to get killed off. So given that this novel was the winner for the horror category on Goodreads, I am not a big fan of it, so I would give it like a 3.5 stars. It was an okay book, but also for a book about final girls, I read Final Girls by Riley Sager in one of my previous reading videos, which I'll have linked down below. I would prefer Final Girls by Riley Sager over this book, The Final Girl Support Group. I just felt like for this novel, there's a lot of characters that you're introduced to because it's a whole group of women, so it was sort of hard for me to keep track of like who's who and who is doing what in this novel. Next up, we have It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. So another Colleen Hoover book finally got off of the waitlist for at the library. So this woman meets a man and they hit it off, but they don't have any plans of like seeing one another again. But you know how it goes. They do cross paths again, and then they start to date, fall in love. However, the main character woman also runs back into her childhood crush from the past. From the woman's past, she had an abusive father growing up, and then she starts to see the warning signs in her current partner. So I would give this a 5 out of 5 stars. I found that this novel was very interesting to read, as well as very, very realistic, delving into toxic relationships, abusive relationships. For me, I volunteered with a domestic violence center, so this book really, really hit home. And this novel is actually inspired by the author's real-life home relationship, having a father that abused her mother. So I just think it's so vulnerable to write about something so personal and so close to the author's life. The next book that I read in January is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So similar to the Final Girl Support Group, this novel also won a Goodreads 2021 Best Book of the Year award in the science fiction category. This novel is about sort of like the end of the world is happening. Basically, the sun is losing energy, so it's going to cause a mass extinction, and not like, okay, billions of years away, but literally in like 30 years, the whole planet will be destroyed. So they have to go to space and figure out what is wrong, what is happening, to try to save the world. So this book lived up to the Goodreads hype expectation, winning book of the year for sci-fi. I would give it a 5 out of 5 stars, but this book was so gripping. It's very long, so some parts might be a little bit slower and less action-packed. It's a story of like friendship and sacrifice. It was so interesting to read because it was so different from the other books that I've read this month, and I feel like just to write science fiction, you have to be so incredibly intelligent because you have to know a ton about math, science, physics, astronomy. It is literally insane. This book was just so interesting. If I could read it over again for the first time and experience it, like, I would love to do that. It was just so good. So the next book I read in January is One of Us is Next by Karen M. McManus. As you can see, this is the sequel to One of Us is Lying. I read and reviewed that in one of my other book videos, and it's also a new TV show. So I was like, okay, that's why I read the first one. And then because I read the first one, I was like, gotta read the second one, you know? This book follows some of the main characters from the first book, but it's like the main character's younger sister is the star of this book now. So same town, same setting. Some of the characters from the first book are also present in this one, but it's a whole new storyline. So in this novel, there is a truth or dare game going around the high school, and you have to respond. If you don't select truth or dare and play the game, then the person corresponding everything will reveal a dark secret about you. So they have to figure out who is running this truth or dare, what do they want, like what is happening in this town. So I enjoyed this read. I would give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I would honestly say that I like this sequel better than the first one, so I feel like that usually doesn't happen. I feel like the first book in this series, it was more of a whodunit, like who was the killer, but I feel like this book, it's more of a mystery. Who is the person behind the truth or dare game, trying to figure that out rather than a whodunit book. So finally, to round out the what I read in January, I read the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, the 3 books in this series. So the first book in the trilogy is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This novel follows a girl's school project where she is following a local case from her town where the police thought that it was a murder-suicide, case closed, but 5 years later when this girl is doing her school project, she doesn't think that they got the right killer, and the killer is still out there. So going through the mystery, the history of the town, the secrets and the backstories of the people in the town and people that were involved. So I would give this a 4 stars. It's definitely very, very interesting. And then I was like, if you read one, I got to just finish the series. So then the second book in the trilogy is Good Girl, Bad Blood. After the main character solves the crime in the first one, then she starts her own true crime podcast in the second book, and then that gets super popular. And then in this town, one of her friends' brother actually goes missing. So then she, on the podcast, is trying to discover the clues and figure out what happened to her friend's brother, the history and backstory there, solving the mystery. So I would give this a 3 out of 5 stars. Definitely my least favorite of the 3 books in this trilogy. You know, I've talked about it in other book videos, but I really dislike in these kind of mystery whodunit books where the whole mystery is revealed right at the end and it sort of comes out of left field. Like it's like a random character that is the bad person. So I feel like that is sort of what happened here. And then the third book in the series is As Good as Dead. In this novel, the main character, after everything else that happened in the first 2 books, now with the podcast super popular, she's solving these crimes. She thinks that she has a stalker and that her life might be in danger, so she has to try to save herself before this creepy person gets her. So this was my favorite book in the series. I would give this a 4 stars as well, but I really felt like this third book really wrapped up the entire series really well, and it was different. Like the first 2 were just trying to solve the mysteries, whodunit, finding all the relationships, but this one, it took like a different turn in there that was different, that it wasn't just, okay, who is the bad person, let me find that person. So I really liked that aspect. I wasn't really expecting it. I was like, okay, it's going to just be another whodunit, but this one really wrapped everything up, and it talks about stuff that happened in the first and second book, and it wasn't just like, okay, let me bring in random characters to finish it, but it was still with a lot of these same characters with the first and second book. So yeah, that rounds out my what I read in January. After those 3 books, it brings the grand total to 11 books in January. On Goodreads, I am doing the 2022 challenge, where I set my challenge to read 100 books in 2022. So we are on our way with that. Hopefully I can get there with these next 11 months of the year. If you have any books that you think I should read, definitely leave a comment down below. So if you have any good ones, definitely let me know. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up to help me out with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos from me. Thanks so much again, and I will see you all next time.